Hello, welcome back to the Red Planet Project channel. In previous episodes, we have already talked about the terraformation of Mars and the first steps in this process. But before we turn this planet into a new place to live, we must consider how humans will cope in this environment. Mars is a completely different world. Without an atmosphere, without a magnetic field, without hospitable living conditions. How long can the human body endure on Mars? Will future inhabitants of the Red Planet be different from us? How should we prepare for such an extreme journey? Today we will look at Mars from the perspective of humans, not as a great engineering project, but as a challenge for biology and psychology. Gravity on Mars is only 38% of Earth's, which means our bodies will have to adapt to it. We already know that prolonged exposure to microgravity causes bone mass loss and muscle weakening, problems with the circulatory system, changes in brain structure and cognitive abilities. What does this mean for future colonists? Perhaps the Martians of the future will be taller and weaker with elongated limbs adapted to life in lower gravity. Should we consider genetic modifications in advance to facilitate adaptation? Or will we use exoskeletons and supporting technologies? Long-term stays on Mars may affect how our bodies process oxygen. It is possible that over time changes in the respiratory system will allow colonists to use the limited amount of oxygen in the atmosphere more efficiently. The low atmospheric pressure on Mars means that our bodies would have to adjust to a different way of regulating fluids. On Earth, our hearts and blood vessels function in a specific way, but under lower Martian pressure, long-term changes in the circulatory system may occur. Will future Martians need to take special medications to regulate blood pressure? Mars is not just a challenge for the body, but also for the mind. Colonists will struggle with prolonged isolation from family and society, limited living space and routine, the constant awareness that any failure could be fatal. Astronauts on the International Space Station practice coping with isolation, but living on Mars will be an even greater challenge, with no immediate return option. What psychological strategies can help deal with these challenges? Will we develop virtual reality technologies in the future that will help colonists feel less isolated? Will future inhabitants of Mars have access to recreational activities that allow them to maintain mental health? Perhaps Mars bases will feature relaxation areas simulating natural landscapes using holographic technology. Maybe artificial skies and simulated sunrises will help maintain a stable circadian rhythm. Long-term life on Mars may cause new generations to differ from Earthlings. Possible changes include different skin pigmentation as protection against radiation, metabolic changes due to a different diet, the emergence of new genetic traits in future Martians. Could Mars become the cradle of a new human species? How long will evolutionary adaptation to new conditions take? Will a new language emerge, or perhaps even a culture different from that of Earth? One possible scenario is the development of a new way of communication, in an environment with limited resources and the need to conserve oxygen. Future Martians may develop more efficient speech patterns or increase the use of gestures and body language. Will the colonization of Mars lead to the birth of an entirely new civilization? There will be no access to fresh products on Mars, and most food will come from hydroponic and aeroponic farms. This may influence changes in the metabolism of colonists. It is possible that future Martians will have a different gut microbiome composition or new nutritional requirements. Will their bodies eventually adapt to the new diet? The diet of colonists may also include protein derived from insects or lab-grown meat, reducing the need for large amounts of resources. What will the meals of future Mars inhabitants look like? Will people learn to produce new foods unknown on Earth adapted to Martian conditions? What dangers await humans on Mars? How must humans prepare for the journey? Traveling to Mars is not an ordinary space expedition. It is a mission that requires years of preparation. Every astronaut who has the chance to set foot on the surface of the Red Planet must undergo intensive training, including physical training. The body must be prepared for prolonged microgravity and later adaptation to Martian conditions. Technological training, knowledge of life support systems, navigation equipment, repair and habitat operations, space medicine, the ability to handle emergency situations, basic surgical and first aid skills, psychological tests and isolation. Future colonists will be isolated from the rest of humanity for a long time, requiring strong mental resilience. Mission simulations such as CHAPEA NASA, MDRS, Mars Desert Research Station and HICs help scientists test human capabilities for living in extreme conditions. Who will travel to Mars? The mission to Mars will not be open to everyone. The first colonization crew must consist of highly specialized individuals capable of surviving harsh conditions and solving problems independently. What qualifications will be required? Engineers and technicians, responsible for maintaining habitats, vehicles and energy systems. Life support specialists, biologists and environmental engineers working on water recycling, oxygen production and atmospheric control in bases. Doctors and health specialists, providing medical care in extreme conditions. Astrobiologists and geologists, studying potential traces of life on Mars and analyzing regolith composition psychology and social organization specialists, managing interpersonal relationships, conflict resolution, and maintaining the mental well-being of colonists. Will the mission to Mars eventually be open to ordinary people? Perhaps in a few decades, programs for settlers will emerge where individuals do not need to be scientists or astronauts. What will colonists do? Life on Mars will not be like a vacation. Every day will be scheduled down to the minute, and every person in the colony will have key responsibilities to ensure the survival of the entire group. What will their daily routine look like? Base maintenance, checking life support systems, air filters, and energy systems. Food cultivation, colonists will need to care for hydroponic and aeroponic farms producing food. Exploration and research, missions outside the habitat to analyze soil composition, search for resources and test new technologies. Waste management and recycling. Mars is an environment where nothing can be wasted. Water, air, and materials must be reused multiple times. Communication with Earth, sending reports, receiving new instructions, and coordinating further actions. For a long time, each person on Mars will have a clearly defined role. However, as the colony grows, new professions may emerge. Teachers, artists, or perhaps even chefs. Is this a one-way journey? One of the most difficult questions regarding the mission to Mars is whether there is a way back. At this moment, most plans assume that the first crews will have to stay permanently. The problem is logistics. Returning requires enormous amounts of fuel, which must either be transported or produced on Mars. Some companies like SpaceX plan to develop fuel production technology on-site, using resources from the Martian atmosphere and regolith. If successful, future missions may be able to return to Earth. But the first generation of colonists, they may never see their home planet again. What do you think? Should the colonization of Mars be a one-way trip? Or should we focus on building transport systems that enable return journeys? Let us know in the comments. What are the biggest dangers of the mission? The mission to Mars is one of the riskiest expeditions in human history. Here are the greatest threats. Life support system failure. On Mars, there is no escape if something goes wrong. Lack of immediate medical assistance, even minor injuries or infections could be fatal. Psychological effects of isolation. Without proper psychological support, colonists may experience depression and anxiety. Supply chain issues. The first years of the colony will rely on shipments from Earth. Any delay in transport could be catastrophic. How can we mitigate these risks? The development of autonomous technologies, artificial intelligence, and 3D printing could help create a self-sufficient colony. But will that be enough? Do you think the mission to Mars is too dangerous, or is it worth taking the risk for the future of humanity? Share your opinion in the comments. What dangers await humans on Mars? Key technologies. What will ensure survival on Mars? Mars is an extremely demanding environment where every aspect of daily functioning must be carefully considered. The survival of colonists will depend on advanced technologies. Here are the key systems without which settling on Mars would be impossible. Life support systems, oxygen production, MOXIE, air filtration, temperature and atmospheric pressure regulation in the habitat. Energy sources, solar panels, nuclear reactors, kilopower, or perhaps geothermal energy. Communication with Earth, signal delay ranges from 5 to 20 minutes, so the mission requires autonomous management systems. Martian vehicles, rovers, drones, and mobile habitats that enable terrain exploration, water and waste recycling systems. On Mars, nothing can be wasted, so colonists will have to reuse resources. Will it be possible in the future to create self-sufficient systems that allow Martians to function without supplies from Earth? Daily life on Mars. What will a colonist's day look like? Life on Mars will be full of challenges, but the daily routine of colonists must be well organized. What might their typical day look like? Morning, checking life support systems, charging habitat batteries, reporting health status. Work, habitat maintenance plant, cultivation soil and atmospheric analysis. Scientific experiments. Exploration. Some crew members will go outside in suits to conduct research. Free time, physical exercises. VR games, contact with family on Earth evening. Team briefing, review of scientific data regeneration. Will life on Mars in the future become more similar to life on Earth? Maybe the colony will develop its own culture and new ways to spend free time. The greatest challenge of Mars colonization. Mars is beautiful but a deadly place. What do you think is the biggest threat to colonists? Lack of oxygen, radiation, low gravity, or maybe something else we haven't considered yet? Write in the comments what you think is the most difficult obstacle to overcome. Will Martians be different from Earthlings? Let's assume that people actually settle on Mars. In 100 years, will Martians be the same as Earthlings? Could they create their own culture, language, way of life? Do you think Mars colonization will change humans into a new civilization? Let us know in the comments. Are we ready for Mars? Mars is a planet full of challenges, from extreme climate to limited resources to psychological and social obstacles. In this episode, we discussed how technology will help people survive on Mars, what daily life for colonists will look like, what dangers pose the greatest challenge for future Martians. Man Plus. Can we adapt to Mars? One idea for the colonization of Mars is to adapt humans to the conditions of the red planet, instead of changing the entire environment. In the novel Man Plus by Frederik Pohl, the main character undergoes biological modifications to survive on Mars without a spacesuit. Could this be our future? Genetic modifications, increased resistance to radiation, metabolic changes, adaptation of the respiratory system, implants and exoskeletons. Technology supporting the human body in Martian conditions. Will future Martians become a completely different species? What could be the long-term consequences of such changes? Should we focus on Martian human evolution instead of terraforming Mars? What changes might occur in human civilization on Mars? The colonization of Mars could lead to the formation of a new civilization independent of Earth. What changes might occur in the society of future Martians? A new language and means of communication. Isolation from Earth could lead to language evolution or the creation of a new way of communicating. Changes in social structure. Will Mars be governed like a country, or will an entirely new social system emerge? New holidays and traditions, the first landing on Mars, the first Martian-born child. What might future celebrations look like? Will Martians still feel like Earthlings, or will they develop their own identity? Is the colonization of Mars morally justified? Colonizing Mars is not only a technological challenge, but also an ethical one. Do we have the right to alter another planet? What dilemmas might arise? Exploitation of Martian resources. Should we treat Mars as a source of raw materials for Earth? The possibility of life on Mars. If we discover microorganisms, do we have the right to terraform the planet? Legal issues. Who will govern Mars? Should we consider it a shared heritage of humanity? Should we colonize Mars, or rather focus on protecting its unique environment? What are the biggest challenges of colonizing Mars? In this episode, we explored the dangers and challenges that await humans on Mars, how technology can help in adapting to life on Mars, how our civilization might change in Martian conditions, whether colonizing Mars is morally justified, and what consequences it brings. Will future Martians still be part of humanity, or will they form a new independent civilization? What are the biggest challenges? Share your opinion in the comments. If you liked this episode, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss future content.